Runa had spent her life healing the sick and delivering babies for everyone in the village, asking nothing but herbs and food in return. But when she saved the life of a thrall's child instead of focusing on the jarl's fever, they called her a witch who chose slaves over nobility. As the flames consumed her body, Runa whispered words that would make them understand that some healers know more than just medicine. Runa the Herb-Wise had served her village for 30 years, learning her craft from her grandmother, who had learned from hers in an unbroken chain stretching back to the old gods. Her knowledge of plants, bones, and blood ran deeper than anyone suspected. She could heal wounds that should have been fatal, ease births that seemed impossible, and cure fevers that other healers couldn't understand. Everyone came to her eventually. Jarls and thralls, warriors and farmers, mothers and children. Sickness recognized no social boundaries, and neither did Runa's healing touch. She asked for no gold, accepting only food, herbs, and the occasional favor that kept her small hut stocked with the materials her work required. But Runa's true power wasn't just in healing. Her grandmother had taught her the older arts, the ones that drew on forces most people preferred to forget existed. She knew how to speak with spirits, how to read the patterns that revealed coming events, and most dangerously, how to weave curses that could reach across death itself. These darker abilities remained hidden, used only when necessary and never for personal gain. Runa understood that fear was the enemy of trust, and trust was essential for a healer's work. But she also understood that some knowledge was too important to die with its keeper. The crisis came during harvest season when plague struck the village with devastating force. Warriors fell as quickly as children, and even Runa's extensive knowledge struggled against a disease that seemed to resist every treatment she attempted. On the worst night, 2 patients needed her immediate attention. Jarl Magnus lay burning with fever in his great hall, surrounded by anxious retainers who offered vast rewards for his recovery. Simultaneously, word came that Astrid, a thrall woman, was dying in childbirth while her infant struggled for life. Traditional wisdom demanded clear priority. The jarl's life was worth dozens of thralls, and his recovery would benefit the entire community. But Runa's healer instincts saw something different. Magnus's fever, while serious, would likely break naturally within days. The thrall mother and child faced immediate death without expert intervention. She made the choice that doomed her. Racing to Astrid's side, Runa spent the crucial hours performing the delicate work needed to save both mother and baby. Her knowledge of anatomy, gained from years of studying corpses in secret, allowed her to attempt procedures that seemed miraculous to those watching. Both patients survived. But when Runa finally reached the Jarl's hall, Magnus had already passed through the fever's crisis and lay recovered, wondering why the village's most skilled healer had abandoned him in favor of worthless slaves. Magnus's recovery didn't prevent his rage. To have been ignored in favor of thralls wasn't just insulting. It was evidence of dangerous thinking that threatened the natural order of society. A healer who prioritized slaves over nobles might harbor other seditious ideas. "She chose them over me," Magnus declared to the assembled village, his voice carrying the authority of someone unaccustomed to contradiction. What kind of loyalty does that show? What kind of thinking guides such choices? The accusations grew with each retelling. Runa's extensive knowledge became evidence of unnatural learning. Her success with difficult cases proved supernatural assistance. Her refusal to accept gold demonstrated contempt for proper social hierarchies. Most damaging were the whispered claims about her healing methods. Witnesses spoke of strange words she muttered during treatments, unusual herbs that couldn't be identified, and procedures that seemed too effective to be purely natural. Fear transformed gratitude into suspicion as people wondered what prices their healing had carried. "She's a witch," Magnus pronounced finally, giving voice to what many had begun thinking. Her power comes from dark sources, and her loyalties lie with forces that oppose our way of life. The proof is in her choices. She serves darkness, not light. The trial was swift and predetermined. Magnus had already decided Runa's fate, and the assembled villagers were too frightened to oppose their jarl's judgment. Witnesses testified to her strange knowledge, her unusual methods, and her suspicious priorities. She knew things no normal woman could know, testified Bjorn the smith, whose infected wound she had saved from killing him. She spoke words and languages that sounded like demon speech, and her treatments worked too well to be natural. She refused good Christian silver, added Helga the baker, conveniently forgetting that Runa had delivered 3 of her children safely when other healers had given up hope. What honest person turns away blessed coin unless they serve unholy powers? Runa's defense was simple and hopeless. I heal because healing is what the gods gave me to do. I choose patience based on need, not wealth. My knowledge comes from study, not dark bargains. But fear had already transformed the village's perspective. Her gifts were no longer blessings, but evidence of corruption. Her dedication was no longer admirable, but proof of unnatural obsession. Her success was no longer fortunate, but suspicious. Magnus's verdict surprised no one. Death by fire, so that flames may purify whatever corruption has taken root in our community. As they bound Runa to the stake, she felt no anger toward the villagers she had served faithfully for decades. Fear made people cruel, and they genuinely believed they were protecting themselves from supernatural threat. But she felt profound disappointment in their willingness to trade justice for security. The flames began slowly, giving her time for final preparations that her captors didn't understand. While they saw a defeated witch awaiting execution, Runa was completing rituals her grandmother had taught her for this exact situation, the rites that would transform death from ending into beginning. "You think you're destroying a threat," she called out as the fire grew higher, her voice carrying clearly over the crackling flames. "But you're creating something far more dangerous than anything you've imagined." The words she whispered next were in the old tongue, the language of power that predated human settlement of these lands. They were binding words, curse words, words that reached across the barrier between life and death to forge connections that physical destruction couldn't sever. As the flames consumed her body, Runa felt her consciousness expand beyond its physical boundaries. Death wasn't ending her education, it was completing it. In the realm beyond flesh, she encountered the true sources of the power she had only touched while living. In death, Runa discovered that her grandmother's teachings had prepared her for far more than earthly healing. The old knowledge included instructions for maintaining consciousness after physical death, for learning from spirits who had mastered arts impossible for the living, and most importantly, for returning with abilities that transcended natural law. Her education accelerated beyond anything possible while bound to flesh. She learned to influence weather patterns, to speak directly into people's dreams, to manipulate the boundary between life and death that most souls crossed only once. The spirits who taught her had been waiting centuries for a student with her combination of natural talent and justified grievance. But the most important lesson was patience. Supernatural revenge required careful timing, systematic planning, and thorough understanding of her target's deepest fears. Quick vengeance might satisfy emotion, but wouldn't serve justice. True reckoning demanded that each person understand exactly why they were being punished. Runa's influence began manifesting weeks after her execution, so gradually that nobody connected the events to her death. Crops began failing despite perfect weather. Livestock sickened without apparent cause. Wells that had never run dry suddenly produced bitter, undrinkable water. Magnus dismissed these problems as natural misfortunes until the dreams began. Night after night, he found himself standing in Runa's hut, watching her treat patients, while her voice explained exactly how she had saved lives that other healers would have lost. "You killed me for choosing healing over politics," Dream Runa would say, her words carrying conviction that made denial impossible. "But you never understood what kind of healer I really was. Now you'll learn." The dreams grew more intense, more detailed, and more impossible to dismiss as mere guilt. Runa showed him the true extent of her knowledge, the lives she had saved through abilities that went far beyond conventional medicine, and most terrifyingly, the power she had never used while living, because she had hoped humanity would prove worthy of mercy. The supernatural punishment escalated methodically. Each person who had testified against Runa faced consequences specifically tailored to their betrayal. Bjorn the smith's tools began breaking in his hands, no matter how carefully he forged them. Helga the baker's bread turned moldy even in perfect conditions. But the physical manifestations were less important than the psychological campaign. Every witness began experiencing dreams where Runa forced them to confront the truth about their testimony. They relived moments when she had helped them, saved their children, or provided healing when no one else could help. "You called my knowledge unnatural," Dream Runa would tell them, "but you never complained when that knowledge saved your daughter's life. You claimed I served darkness, but you never refused the light I brought to your family's suffering." The psychological pressure became unbearable as people realized they had murdered someone who had devoted her life to serving them. Guilt transformed into terror as they understood that Runa's death hadn't ended her ability to influence their lives. The climax came when Magnus, driven to desperation by months of supernatural torment, attempted to dig up Runa's remains and burn them again. But the grave was empty except for a single piece of parchment bearing words in Runa's handwriting. "You thought fire could destroy what I am, but you never understood what I am. I am the knowledge that heals and the power that protects. I am the choice to serve life over law, need over greed. You can burn my body, but you cannot burn what I represent." Below the message was a list of names, every person in the village who had ever received Runa's help, including Magnus himself when she had saved him from a childhood fever that would have killed him without her intervention. The final line carried a promise and a warning. "I return not for revenge, but for education. Learn what it means to choose compassion over fear, or face the consequences of your choice forever." Magnus's breakdown was complete and public. Standing in the village square where Runa had been burned, he confessed to the assembled people that he had ordered the execution of someone who had saved his own life multiple times. The political scapegoating was exposed, the false testimony was revealed, and the village faced the truth about what they had done. But Runa's supernatural justice transcended simple revenge. As Magnus begged forgiveness from her empty grave, a voice carried on the wind, not threatening, but teaching. "Fear made you cruel, but cruelty doesn't have to make you irredeemable. Learn to choose healing over hurting, protection over persecution, wisdom over fear. Become the people I always believed you could be." The supernatural manifestations gradually faded as the village began changing. They established new laws protecting healers, created systems for caring for thralls, and most importantly, chose leaders based on wisdom rather than wealth. Magnus, broken by guilt and supernatural education, spent his remaining years serving the poor and sick, trying to atone for the murder of someone who had embodied everything he should have protected. Some teachers continue their lessons even after death, and some knowledge is too important to die with its keeper. Runa's final gambit wasn't revenge. It was the completion of a lifetime spent trying to heal more than just physical wounds. If this tale of ultimate payback moved you, hit that like button and let us know in the comments which part shocked you the most. Subscribe to Time for Payback, for more legendary stories where betrayal meets justice. And don't forget to ring that notification bell, because every betrayal has its reckoning, and every story holds the power to change everything. What revenge story should we tell next? Drop your suggestions below. Until next time, remember, karma never forgets.